everybody had an ocean across the USA. Then everybody be so.
We're going to Producer's Choice here on the bump, so we've got Surfing USA, which is always a fun song. But moreover, we have a fun interview. We are incredibly pleased to be joined by sports writer and writer Hal Bock. Long career of writing sports and teaching, and Hal's done a great book, especially for you Chicago Cubs fans, but I think it's a good book for baseball fans anywhere, even historians. The Last Chicago Cubs Dynasty Before the Curse, 1906 to 1909. Yes, folks, it's been that long. And with that, we've got the man here that wrote it, Hal Bock. Hal, how are you this evening, friend?
Hi, Tony. I'm good. Looking forward to talk to you.
And same thing here. Now, tell us about your life, what got you interested in sports, and what got you started in sports writing.
I was 8 years old when my father took me to my first baseball game. And you know, when you're 8 years old, you look around and everything is larger than life. And I'm in the ballpark for the first time, and the light stanchions and the bleachers and the 55,000 seats in the Polo Grounds in New York. And my eye catches this structure that's hanging off the second deck. And I asked my dad, what was that? What is that? And he said, oh, that's the press box. He said, that's where the writers sit. I said, the writers? He said, yeah, they come here every day and they write about the games. I said, that's their job? He said, yeah. And I thought, wow, what could be better than that? So I decided right then and there that was what I was going to do with my life.
Fantastic.
And I'm one of those few fortunate individuals who got to live out his life's dream.
That's a wonderful thing. Now, when you started covering sports, what were you covering? What years, what teams?
Well, my first job with the Associated Press in 1963, I came to work for the AP in 1963. I covered hockey. I covered the Rangers for a good 9 or 10 years. And from there, I moved on to baseball, which was really my first love. But I also covered, in my career, I covered just about everything you could cover. I covered 30 World Series and 30 Super Bowls. I covered Wimbledon. I covered the Kentucky Derby. I covered the Indy 500. You name it, I was there.
Boy, that's a fascinating thing. And it's funny. The first game I could remember was at the Polo Grounds too, but it was the early Mets. And it was, I have very vivid recollections of that, and there's a number of us on Facebook that reminisce and still mourn the demise of the Polo Grounds to this day.
I love that old ballpark. I had some happy times there with my dad.
Yeah, it just had, it's, I guess Leo DeRocher said that when baseball left New York the first time, it was like pushing Humpty Dumpty over the wall. All the king's horses and all the king's men just couldn't quite put it back together again, you know?
That's true. It was a magical place, and it was empty for several years until the Mets came along.
Yeah, and it was painted blue and orange, and it was this like brand new. To me, it was a brand new thing, and people were saying to me, "No, this is an old ballpark. It goes back a whole lot of years."
Boy, did it ever! Did it ever!
So, wind fast forward to the future, and I'm sure we can get into a tremendous discussion with everything that you have covered in the past. What was the motivation behind the Cubs book?
Well, as I said before, I covered 30 World Series, and never did I cover the Cubs in a World Series. And I thought about that. I thought, here's a team that's been it was an original team in the National League in 1876. Mm-hmm. Why aren't they in the World Series? So I started to do a little research, and I discovered that there was a time from 1906 to 1910 when they were the best team in baseball. And they were in the World Series 4 times. They won 2 World Series, and they had the best record in baseball. They played, over that period of time, they played .693 ball, which is like winning 7 games in every 10 you play. And that's just not done, That's a dynasty to end all dynasties.
Now, I have a fascination for early baseball, and I think a lot of baseball fans, when you start to tell them about Smokey Joe Wood or the Babe before New York or home run Baker, they look at you like you have 6 heads. You have no idea what are you talking about. Can you describe what old-time baseball was like? And I know it would take
quite different from today's product. They didn't have sabermetrics. It was just a completely different game. I mean, there was 9 plays, and there was 3 outs to an inning and 9 innings to a game. That was true. But there was no designated hitter. There was no interleague play. It was just a different game. And the players were a different breed. They were kind of the undercurrent of undercut body of America. They were just not respected very much. There was a lot of gambling that went on. There were games being fixed all over the place, and there were drunks, and they were womanizers. I mean, this was some community of people. And to me, it's fascinating. They're fascinating individuals, fascinating personalities.
Now, I'm sure you would know about this when we, if we're on the computer and we're at a classic ballpark site and we dig up a picture of an old ballpark like, Baker Bowl way back when, or League Park in Cleveland or something like this, it's usually a view of the field looking out. And when the field's looking out, we see the scoreboard. And on the scoreboard, there's in huge white letters, no betting. And I remember when I used to teach years back, there was an older fellow whom I shared an office with who told me that baseball betting then was different than it is now. People would bet on the pitch. And
right. I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, like 5 to 10, it's a strike. Okay, ball 1, double or nothing, it's a ball. Okay, put it up. And, and I guess what happened was they were running vice cops up and down in New York, up and down the, the aisles of the, see who was betting. I mean, it was absolutely.
The Super Bowl, they have betting on the Super Bowl. What's the first punt and what's going to be the score at the end of the first minute, on and on. There's all kinds of exotic betting that goes on. And I suppose it happened in those days as well.
Yeah, it's really something. But you really have a great characterization there of the early ball players. One of the things, though, that I did not want to be remiss and not mention to you was you had spoken to some Cubs legends in doing this book. You spoke to Cavaretta, Ernie Banks, Charlie Grimm. I mean, to me, they're like monuments for, I'd be sitting there going like Ralph Cramden, hummina, hummina, hummina. That must have been quite an experience.
It was a magnificent experience. I came along at a time when these guys were older. They were recognizing that they were coming to the end of their lives, and they were only too happy to just chat and talk about the old days. And I loved talking to these guys. So it was a treasure trove of information, that stories that they told, and I loved it. I loved talking to older people.
Yeah,
Not that I'm an older person.
Yeah, me too. I was going to say, aren't we all? Now, this is the era of which we all heard growing up: Tinker to Evers to Chance.
Correct.
The double play combination. Now, was the double play at that time something new in baseball?
It was not as frequent as it is today. Everybody thinks that Tinker to Evers to Chance was the greatest double play combination you could have. Let me tell you that from 1906 to 1909, a sports writer did some research, not me, did some research on this and discovered that Tinker to Evers to Chance double play combination in those 5 years made 54 double plays. That's not very many.
It's not a lot.
Not a lot at all. But there was a New York sports writer named Franklin P. Adams, and he was on his way to the ballpark one day, and he got a call from his office. Before he left his office, he got a call from the composing room, and he was told, your column is 8 lines short. And so, I'll write 8 lines on my way to the ballpark, and I'll send them to you. And he wrote a little poem about the Cubs double play combination. And it became so famous. I can read it to you if you like.
I would like that very much.
These are the saddest of possible words. Tinker to Evers to Chance. Trio of bear cubs, fleeter than birds. Tinker to Evers to Chance. Thoughtlessly pricking our Donovan bubble, making a giant hit into a double. Words that are weighty with nothing but trouble. Tinker to Evers to Chance. And they printed it in the newspaper, and it got picked up, and it became the ballad of the Chicago Cubs of that era. And a lot of people will tell you that because of that poem, all three of them, Tinker, Evers, and Chance, are in the Baseball Hall of Fame.
It's, you know, it almost makes you think of that poem that was said about Knute Rockne's Four Horsemen.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
That very.
You never know what's gonna catch on, you know.
And you were mentioning in the book that these guys were not the best of friends.
Oh, it's really ironic. You know, you grow up to believe that there has to be a certain chemistry in the clubhouse, and guys have to like one another and get along with one another. Well, Tinker and Evers did not get along. Tinker was the shortstop, and Johnny Evers was the second baseman. And in those days, the teams dressed in the hotel and went out to the ballpark in cabs. Why that was, I couldn't tell you, but that's what they did. And they would meet in the lobby of the hotel and get a hack and go out to the ballpark. And one day, Johnny Evers came down all dressed in his uniform, jumped into a cab, and left three teammates in the lobby. And Tinker was just furious. Joe Tinker he couldn't believe that Evers had pulled a stunt like that. And when he got to the ballpark, he confronted Evers, and they had a pretty good Donnybrook, and they agreed not to talk to each other. And for 5 years, the shortstop and the second baseman on this great double play combination did not speak to each other. And meanwhile, the manager of the team, Frank Chance, was the first baseman. And he was a surly sort of a guy as well. So he had the infield of this great dynasty team, and they were just a bunch of unpleasant characters. Did not get along with one another.
It's an amazing thing. It's almost reminiscent of Vivian, Vance, and William Frawley. You know, it's like.
Oh, I have another story for you.
Sure.
Tinker was so angry at Evers that on one play, ball gets hit to shortstop. Tinker throws to Evers as if he's Bob Gibson throwing a fastball. He fires the ball to second base. The ball breaks Evers' finger when it hits him. So now he's got even more reason. Evers now has even more reason not to talk to Tinker. So that's the root of their rivalry and their unhappiness with each other.
It's an amazing story. Now, this is also the era of Three-Fingered Brown, which was always a joke growing up.
Four-Finger Brown.
Right.
They called him Three-Finger Brown, but he really had four fingers. He was a great pitcher, and like most of the players of that era, he came from the farms, from rural America.
Mm-hmm.
He was a farm boy growing up, and as a child, about 7 or 8 years old, he got his hand caught in one of these machines, and part of his finger got knocked off. Part of his middle finger got knocked off, and they patched him up, and he went about his business. And 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, he's chasing an animal, and he falls on his hand, and two other fingers get mangled. But he still has four fingers. He does not have three fingers. But with the mangled fingers and the absence of a middle finger, when he threw a pitch, batters had never seen that kind of a spin on a pitch. And that's what led to his being one of the greatest pitchers of that era.
It's
Four-Finger Brown.
We're never going to see anything like that again. I'm almost positive. Now the ball back then compared to now. Now today it's like somebody looks at the ball the wrong way and the ball gets tossed out of play. Gaylord Perry would not be able to throw the spitball today because the ball gets changed too frequently. You know,
You're right about that.
But what was the ball like then? Did it stay in the game? If it was hitting the crowd, would the fans throw it back?
For the most part, it stayed in the game. They did not change balls every 2 or 3 pitches. You know, it was a simpler time in America, and the game was simpler. And you had a baseball, and you used it. And until I guess it got tatted, there are balls up in the Hall of Fame that you can't believe were used in baseball games. I mean, they're raggedy, and but it was a different era. It was a time of simple baseball.
Now, during this time, the spitball was legal?
Yes. Yes. The best pitchers in the game used the spitball. Now, I don't know if four-finger Brand used the spitball, but a lot of the other pitchers did. And it was legal until 1920.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's like, wherever you sit on the steroid debate, and I'm probably one of the people that's the most angry about it, but when you look pre-1920, it's the whole alteration of statistics. Pitchers were able to routinely throw spitballs.
They lived on it. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
That was their main pitch.
Man, oh man, and we don't consider that. It's just that just dawned on me. Now, Slide Kelly Slide, which we all heard growing up. Kelly was sort of a dapper sort. Did he invent the slide?
He was one of the first to do it. Yeah. Did he invent it? He may very well have. I couldn't testify to that. Mm-hmm. But he was a great player. King Kelly was a showman. And when he got traded to Boston, he was ushered to the ballpark in a little chariot led by horses. It's unbelievable, the sort of things that went on. King Kelly was one of the great stars of that era.
Yeah, it's then the other thing I was reading in the book is that the catcher of the team left baseball to become a pocket billiard player.
Johnny Clink was the best catcher in baseball. He was the Cubs catcher, and in fact, he was given the catcher's job over Frank Chance. Chance had been the Cubs catcher, and he was moved to first base against his wishes. He didn't want to play first base. He wanted to be the catcher. But the Cubs had Johnny Clink, and Clink was a better player. And so Clink became the catcher. And not only Clink once threw 4 base runners out in one game. That shows you how good a catcher he was. And not only was he a very good catcher, but he happened to be a very good billiards player, pocket billiards. And it's not clear whether this was a result of a holdout or whether he just got tired of baseball. But in 1909, he walked away from the Cubs. They had been world champions in 1908 and in 1907. And he walked away. And he said, I'm going to defend my pocket billiards championship. And as a result, the Cubs did not win the pennant in 1909. He was lured back to Chicago and back to baseball in 1910. And lo and behold, the Cubs became champions again. So Johnny Clink was a major part of that team, that dynasty.
The park where this Cubs team played, this was not the Wrigley grounds. This was at another place.
Well, they played in a lot of ballparks, especially before the 1900s. They kept moving every couple of years. Mm-hmm. But they wound up in Wrigley Field in the early part of the 20th century, and it carried a lot of different names. But ultimately, it was Wrigley Field. Now it's the same ballpark today. I mean, it's been done over and upgraded. And it's a show place now, but it remains in the same location as the Dynasty team played in.
I didn't know that.
Yes, yes. That's one of the oldest ballparks. That and Fenway Park in Boston are the 2 oldest ballparks in baseball.
Now, for certain, I didn't realize the Dynasty team played there.
Oh, yes. Yes, they did.
And now, of course, you've got baseball during this time. There's no radio. There's newspapers. What was attendance like? And if you weren't at the park, how was the game followed?
A lot of people came to the ball games, but also it was not the way it is today. I mean, the Mets will be home tomorrow night against the Twins, and they'll have 40,000 people, 35,000 people in that ballpark at Citi Field. The Yankees play to a sellout virtually every night, 40,000 people. That was not the way it was in those days. If you got 10,000, you got a lot of people in the ballpark. they're not going to come out. And Chicago's climate is a little dicey sometimes, especially during the World Series time. So there were World Series games that drew very few fans because of the weather. There's snow and rain and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's it's not exactly the fun and sun place, that's for sure.
No, it's not. It's a dicey climate. But the ball club, the loyalty to the ball club often overcomes the climate.
Believe it or not, our time keeps getting away from us on this show. The last question that I have others, but I would like for you to answer is, there was this great dynastic, if in fact a word, start to the Cubs at the start of the 20th century, and then decades, if you will, of mediocrity. Why didn't the Cubs become the Yankees?
Mm-hmm. Well, they had seasons when they won, but something always seemed to go wrong at the last minute. One thing after another. It's strange. The most recent, of course, was Steve Bartman interfering with the foul ball that would have probably been caught by Moises Alou, and they would have been 5 outs away from the World Series. They didn't make it. The great story about the GOAT, Murphy the GOAT. Billy Ciani was a tavern keeper in Chicago, and in 1945 the Cubs made it to the World Series, and he decided to bring his GOAT to the ballpark. Well, this didn't go over very well with management. And he was told to get the GOAT and him out of the ballpark. And he was furious because he had paid $1.75 for each ticket, and that was a lot of money in those days. So he sent a letter to Phil Wrigley, who was the owner of the team at that time, and he told him he was very angry, and he said, "I'm placing a curse on your team. You'll never be in the World Series again." And I got to tell you, Tony, they haven't been in the World Series again since 1945.
And I wonder where the late, if the late Bill Gallo, God rest his soul, if that's where he got GOAT and those cartoons he used to write.
I don't know, maybe.
Yeah.
But they've struggled. They've had a tough time, but they've just clinched a playoff berth. They have the best record in baseball this season.
Let's see them go far.
Maybe the curse will be broken this year.
Hal, we had a great time. Believe it or not, we're out of time, and thanks so much. And where can our fans buy your book?
Oh, it's available at Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com.
Great.
And directly from the publisher, Roman and Littlefield.
And really appreciate your being here. We're sure to talk soon. Best to you and yours, and thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Tony. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
And that was Hal Bock, and we're going to be coming back with some fantastic retro commercials and then my own segment of sports stars turned show hosts. We will be right back.